Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Walker with NACE. I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, JobX, a custom, compliant, and paperless student employment and FWS solution, including government forms. It is my pleasure to introduce to you all Tage Haynes, CEO of NextGen Web Solutions. Go ahead and take it away, Tage.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Hi, everyone. My name is Tage Haynes, and I just want to thank you all for joining us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I know your time is super valuable, so I'm going to jump right in. And as Carrie will address at the end, there'll be a Q&A session, so be sure to drop any questions that you may have in the Q&A area, and at the completion, about 15 minutes prior to the end, I'll spend time answering any of those questions. Let's go ahead and move forward. There we go. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of information about NextGen. I'm happy to see from the registrant list that we received before this demo that many of the schools that are on the list actually use at least one of these products we'll talk about today, but some are using some of the others. So NextGen is based out of Jacksonville, Florida. We are an efficiency technology solution provider exclusively in the higher ed marketplace. And we focus just there to ensure that we don't have any fractured focus. Rather, we look to become experts in the various areas across the higher ed campus where our products do serve both students, supervisors, administrators, and many other types of employees at the institution. NextGen has 4 products and one about to drop in June. Today we'll learn the most about JobX and some about TimesheetX. The highest selling product that we have in the market is Dynamic Forms. And Dynamic Forms, just because it's going to be leveraged a little bit in our conversation today as it's used in JobX, is a product that is in the higher ed space only and allows an institution at a departmental level or across the entire institution to create professional looking forms, remove all paper forms, and when building those forms, it's an easy drag drop process. It's one of the most economical solutions of its kind. So we call it a form generator versus like a DocuSign that you might use, which is where you have a widget, a signature widget, and you put that on the form. This one allows you to create a form, drag and drop design. It allows you to, via real-time APIs, bring in data into those forms. And then you can conditionally route that form to get authorization, signatures, payments, and such. Once the form is complete, you can have attachments. We'll talk about that today when we're dealing with government forms that it supports, like I-9 and W-4. And then once the form is completed, it can go into your imaging solution if you have one. Otherwise, it can be your in-cloud filing cabinet so that you can get away from all that pesky paper and filing cabinet space. You can get back. Scholarship Manager is a product that helps manage institutional scholarships and ensure that you can create custom applications, load in hard and soft requirements so that a sophisticated algorithm occurs and it can match individuals to those scholarships, route it to your committee members, ultimately allow them to review all the letter of recommendations and award the dollars out of that solution. It has a great donor portal so the donors can watch along the way and facilitate students sending thank yous back to them. And then dynamic verification, that's a process that's going to help with a very difficult process in the financial aid space, typically where folks are expected to review about 30% or just shy of that of the people who send in a FAFSA and make sure that everything is accurate. that will also be leveraging dynamic forms. We serve over 700 plus. We're actually approaching about 800 colleges and universities nationwide. We are just serving the United States. We are not doing anything internationally at this time. Before I get started, I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of the types of schools. This is just a very small sample of the schools, but they're very, prestigious schools. We pride ourselves in the security aspects of our solutions, and knowing that a lot of these schools could be targets. We feel very confident that with all of our exhaustive work to make sure all the data that we manage in this entire life cycle we'll talk today is safe. Not to mention that we're really proud at NextGen. For those of you who may be familiar with some of our products that you may use, we did a customer survey for our JobX and TimesheetX customers most recently in 2022, and we've never seen a perfect rating in our premier customer service, which is super important to us. And so I wanted to just help you understand that we are here for you as you see this functionality today. Our differential is that we customize the products extensively so that it meets your exact needs. It's not a one size fits all whatsoever. And customer service is as important to us as everything that we offer in the solutions. As I get started, why I even thought it might be helpful to speak to this group was some of the trends that are going on in the federal work study space. One of them is that a lot of the student employment offices and federal work study programs are being moved over to the career services offices so that you can get a more of an experiential learning aspect, ensuring that not only are you looking to help your valued customers find employment post-graduation, but also while they're attending as an undergraduate. So that is very important. So we want to help you understand how we serve that on-campus undergraduate as well as off-campus postgraduate, and can work very, well with other career services solutions. The other reason was there's a great trend of a very detailed program reviews that are going on with the Department of Ed for the federal work study program, and rightfully so. This is federal money, and they're trying to ensure that everyone is handling this program with the utmost concern for compliance. And that's no different than what happened with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So back in 2017, UT Knox went through a pretty invasive audit, and that seems to be happening across the nation. They had 5 auditors come in, and one auditor spent 40 hours alone reviewing their federal work study program. They were asked to recreate 2 years worth of job listings and timesheets for those population of students. And UT Knox, to say the least, was not expecting that much. And when they went through that process, they had some alarming results. So this is the size of their program, and they ultimately were found to have numerous findings, but 4 severe. And for those of you on the line, I'm sure you're familiar with if you have too many violations in this area, it could affect your federal work study funding. So that's absolutely where JobX and TimesheetX come in to try and assist with that. So what were their findings? So before they had JobX and TimesheetX, they in these findings were found to have allowed kids to begin working before the I-9 and other pertinent onboarding forms were in place. They were found to allow kids to work when they were in a scheduled class, work more than the typical 20-hour max that many schools use. Not all schools use a 20-hour max, but if you use any type of max hour per week threshold, like UT was doing, this is where they had problems. They were also having students working when their award balances had been exceeded, when their SAP status was moved to an unsatisfactory status, and when they went below their designated minimum credit hours that they had to be attending. So once they went with JobX and TimesheetX, that all those violations were resolved. And how did that happen? So you'll hear about these things that I'm about to list off ad nauseum today, but we hope that once you understand them a little bit more, you can understand the value that they bring, because all of these things are happening systematically. So that validation or compliance service that we'll talk about is really intended to, one, protect you and your liabilities at your school, but two, also take that burden off of your hiring supervisors from needing to be up to speed on all of the different compliance aspects and employment eligibility checks they should be doing. And it really also helps give you, the administrator, time back in your job in case you're the one that's actually doing some of these checks yourself. So the students can get validated at UT now when they go in and they are trying to work. A class schedule is going to be loaded into the site, and then as they enter time, if they are supposed to be in a class, unless a holiday or a class exception like a cancellation is configured, then they will not be permitted to work. So you take that burden off of those folks, and you take the burden off your administrators from having to retrain different supervisors that may come in and out of those roles entirely, because the system is doing that. It's doing that same thing with max hours. So we can help you designate what your max hours that you want to prevent your kids from exceeding, both on or off campus. They can be prevented from exceeding their award balance with not only hard edits when they try to go in and work, but also preventative warnings well in advance, so you can set thresholds, when their balance gets below 200 and then 100, so that you really minimize that entirely. It can check their SAP status, whether it's still satisfactory or whether credit hours. And then you'll see an elaborate higher validation service as well. All these validation services can be customized uniquely by your different populations of users. So if you have non-work study employees, you can set their particular validations differently from those that are federal work study type of employees, and still differently for those that might just be regular hourly employees. So it can be used across all different employee populations. And then also it's checking for the government and onboarding forms, presence of them or not. And then we will see how we've also used our dynamic forms product to leverage and be able to offer you a completely paperless government form or onboarding form solution, and insert those forms for completion and routing before the individual is hired and post-hire, however you wish that to work. UT Knox also was extremely paper intensive. So most of everything they were doing, were paper. Their jobs were posted via paper, which many of you probably are not doing this day, but if you are, this is completely removing all of that paper. Their hire paperwork was all paper, and their timesheets were. They were calculating things manually on the timesheet side of the world, and they were absolutely struggling with that. As you can imagine, the quality goes down when you're doing things manually, and the time takes much longer. After JobX and TimesheetX, they were able to make sure that all their jobs were routed to the appropriate person to approve those jobs. Now, we love all the amazing career services solutions out there, but one area that we've heard is a slight weakness that JobX can really help with is the ability to get those jobs that are being created on campus or off campus for that matter, that are work study in nature, that need to get over to those work study coordinators so that they can review and approve those and make sure that those descriptions are compliant. That was an area where Tennessee was really struggling. And so if you can't get those over to the people who are the experts in that area, you may find that you can have some violations in just your job descriptions alone. We offer app validation service so that when an applicant is applying, you can have your own custom compliance checks. So if you're trying to protect those federal work study jobs to only have federal work study applicants, we can bring in that data and prevent those who are not awarded from seeing those jobs, or they may be able to see them, but they can't apply. Rather, if you also want to make sure that they have, the necessary credit hours and the SAP status, that can be evaluated at time of app. And that is different, again, for different job populations. The other good thing about this that University of Tennessee loved is that our product allows your students or graduates to apply for multiple jobs with one single application. So if they apply for 10 jobs, they don't need to complete an app 10 times. And when they do that sort of thing, if those different jobs have different compliance checks on them, you could very well see a person be permitted to go forward with, say, 6 jobs because they pass those employment eligibility checks, and be they result in an error for the other 4 if they did not pass those. So taking that burden off of your supervisors is super important. Same thing, higher validation. They were able to put that in, and instead of having to make sure they're going and looking up all the employment eligibility aspects of things, that system just does it for them now. They're also able to get those hires out of JobX. We've heard from other solutions that they can't get data in via mass integration type methods or out. And that is not a challenge with JobX. Whatever data you wish to bring in, we customize to accommodate, and then you can export that out. So if you need to get your hiring data out of JobX and into a particular HR database, in this case it was Banner, we can accommodate that. Electronic timesheets were introduced. We have a clock in, clock out feature that allows you to have a very economical solution versus, slide key hardware, very expensive. So that was leveraged. And then at time of entry of their time worked, we also have validation services there. So we're not in the business of trying to eliminate your staff. Rather, we're trying to help you eliminate the administrative burdensome work that you're faced with so that you can serve your valued customers. And that's exactly what happened here. So UT was able to take a great number of full-time employees, staff, students, hours, and director hours, and minimize those extensively, to the tune of about $70,000, and that was in less than their first year, which was a 55% cost reduction. So for them and many schools across the nation, that is huge with budget constraints and so forth. This could pay for our products a couple of times over. So that was a no-brainer for them. So let's talk about JobX and its features. So JobX, as I go through these, offers, as I mentioned, a ton of customization. So job listing management, we can allow you to customize what the questions that the on or off campus supervisors are answering to post their job uniquely by job population. So if you need certain questions for federal work study jobs answered that are different for non-federal work study jobs, or America Read jobs, or community service jobs, we work with you during installation to figure out what those needs are, ensure that you're not eliminating fields that are required in the federal work study type job requirements. And that is super helpful for the very unique business of student employment and work study. I spoke already about job approval workflow. We are able to, upon completion of entering a job listing at the supervisor level, those can now be routed over to be approved by your designated administrator with that expertise to ensure that those job listings are compliant. We have a customized job search. So within the product, you as administrators can create over the data that you're collecting in your job listings, customized job searches. So with your administrative access, you can go in and say, we created a custom field of campus for you, and you have a east, north, west, south campus. You can then use this administrative tool to now build a quick search for your population so that if they hit West Campus, all the West Campus jobs come back. If they don't see what they wish to see in that quick search type of offering, they can then build their own search using an advanced search. Application management is very customizable, if you will, also. So we not only allow you as administrators, or we can do it on your behalf at no additional charge, to use a very easy app designer so that you can add whatever questions you wish, long text, short text, single choice questions, multi-choice questions, upload of types of document questions. You can create your default applications uniquely for each of your job populations, as well as once the employer is creating the job, they can add job specific questions above and beyond your default questions so they can get a real best fit type of candidate to their jobs. But not to worry, when they add those specific job specific questions, not only does the job go through that job approval workflow, but during that approval workflow, you're able to look at those app questions so that you would never have to worry about them adding some inappropriate type question against your EEO policies and such. We'll talk about compliance services, but all those can be customized. You can turn on and off what compliance services you want. You can customize the data that we're looking at within your compliance checks. And then when we get to the higher aspect of things, your higher contract fields online can be customized. So if you have fund and org fields that need to be customized so that when we take the higher data out of JobX and put it back into your HR or payroll systems, or back into, say, your SIS system. A lot of times banner users are taking the higher data and they're bringing it back into their RJ Sear screens, taking out a lot of that double entry burdensome work from each of your users. But once we go through the higher approval workflow, we can customize whether it goes for approval. So maybe your off-campus jobs, you're just blessed to get them to report that they hired someone so that you can have that data for FISAP reporting. So maybe those don't need to come to your administrator for approval, but maybe your other hires you wish to look at and add additional values to them, the fund and org or chart of account, whatever you wish, so that when it feeds back into your system, it has all the necessary data it needs. And then online form hiring forms. We'll talk about this in just a moment, but we can customize via the dynamic forms any form. You'll see some examples of the I-9W4. Those government forms are probably the highest selling piece of dynamic forms these days, as well as within JobX. So what are the benefits? We're customizing those templates and those approval processes and making sure that your job listings are super professional looking and that they're reviewed timely and they have compliance. You're ensuring that your government onboarding forms can be e-signed. You're allowing for those forms to be custom workflowed to whomever needs to deal with those onboarding forms. And then if they're not government forms, because I-9 and W-4 forms, they do not allow us to pull in data from your system to pre-fill it, but that is available for any other onboarding forms. So you can take that data in, increase your quality in those forms, and then you can have conditional logic. So if data pulled into a field is a yes response, it might need to route one way. But if the other response is no, it might route a completely different way. Super sophisticated, achieving exactly what you want from a form completion process. And then you'll see during that whole exchange, it's writing back statuses about each of those forms to JobX. So your student, your supervisor, and administrators can see exactly where those form statuses are. And if a student is not completing their paperwork in a timely fashion, they then can quickly cancel that offer and offer that job to someone else. Automated compliance checks, as we've talked about, streamlined hire approval, robust features, reporting. We have reporting that now your supervisors on or off campus can run their own reports, app reports, hire reports, job reports. And all it will bring back are the data for the particular departments or companies they've been granted access. So taking that reporting effort off of you guys as administrators. And then we've talked about lots of data coming in and out. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but we allow unlimited custom inbound and outbound files. And then we also do API integration. For those of you who are banner schools, we're heavily ethos certified and really getting huge values out of that. So all that data can come in or out of an SIS system, a career services system, if they allow for that data to come out, HR, payroll, and even homegrown solutions. So how does it work? It starts with the on and off campus supervisors. They create a job listing. And as we talked about, if it needs to get to an administrator to approve that job listing, it does in a real-time workflow fashion. Upon approval of that job listing, the applicants are now available to search for the jobs. You do not have to put jobs in a what we call listed state if you don't wish to. Maybe you have jobs that you just want to keep unlisted because you want to use those for your rehires. That's totally supportable. As I mentioned, when they search for jobs, they are able to use an advanced search, and then this is the only solution we're aware of in the market that allows them to apply for multiple jobs with one single app. And we'll show some screenshots of that in a moment. When they do apply, it comes through your custom compliance engine to check all of the rules as you've configured with us. And then if they pass those, it will then allow those applications once submitted to go to all the respective hiring supervisors for the jobs they applied for. So that those campus supervisors can review the applicants. They can communicate with them if they wish to schedule an interview or reject them. All of that can be done individually, or mass applicants can be accommodated in seconds. Once they review and decide who they wish to hire, JobX is a hiring mechanism as well, which is great. Once every person is hired, it's looking at your available openings. And once those available openings are satisfied, the job listing is brought down systematically so you don't have any outdated jobs frustrating your population that they tried to apply and it's been filled for 2 months. Once they go to hire someone, it comes back through this automated compliance engine using that data that we're getting either in a real-time fashion or a nightly file. Those hires can result in an entire fail. They can't go forward, or a pass if everything was good, or a warning if, for instance, they don't have their I-9 and W-4 form, but you want them still to be hired so that after they get notified of their hire, they can go and complete that I-9 and W-4. That all can be accommodated. Once they're hired, if the particular hire is expected to go to your administration team to approve, then they can do so accordingly in a real-time workflow also. And then if you are requiring an individual to proactively accept a hire, that can be configured. And all along this entire life cycle, we have integrated email features that are communicating to each of the users without requiring you to jump out of the solution and make those communications or complete that communication feedback loop. So emails, once the job is created, can go to the administrator telling them, hey, you need to approve this job. Once people have applied for jobs, integrated emails telling the supervisors you've got applicants. Once you've hired someone, we have nice hire approval notifications that have the details of the job in the body of the job, so they know exactly which one they're being hired for. Hiring form integration. So here's an example. All these forms are hosted by by dynamic forms, and as they are being completed each step of the way, you'll see those status updates coming back, and we'll show some screenshots there. But very integrated, very quick to get those forms done as needed. Data integration is a huge focus of ours. We have single sign-on. For those of you who aren't familiar with that term, that's just us working with your IT folks behind the scenes to establish a behind-the-scenes handshake, if you will. That's going to be able to support any type of SSO method that you use. That SSO can also be as sophisticated to control what jobs they can or can't see. It can be used, it can use those compliance data elements that we've talked about at length already to determine if they can come in or not. Data integration can happen in two different ways: through API real-time data integration, or through a nightly batch file or an hourly batch file. Either way is supported. So data integration is super important. We feel that you need to be able to take the data that you are trusting us with in JobX and use it however you wish. So if you want to push data in so that compliance checks can be made, or pre-filling of different forms and such, that is accommodated. And out the back end, if you wish to take it back into other solutions, absolutely fine. So let's talk about some of that data integration. When we're talking about school information solutions like an Ellucian, a Colleague, a PowerFades, a PeopleSoft, Workday, Genzabar, they are oftentimes sending us award data. So original award balance, and the type of award and what period that award covers. Because if you're using say TimesheetX, we end up allowing for the tracking of that award balance as they enter time. I spoke about student employment data. If you're a banner school, RJ Screen is a very important area that getting data back into after you've hired someone is super helpful. Examples of data from an HR, payroll, and imaging. So the employment eligibility data. If you don't need to use our I-9 and W-4 because you use Workday, for instance, and you are already capturing that there, we can help in getting fields created for data that may not be tracked within a SIS system or a payroll or HR. So if you've had this spreadsheet on the side that you're checking things that weren't supported by your larger systems, we can create those fields on the employee's account, and you can now track the presence of those in that solution itself, and then bring it out if you need to. But onboarding form data, and then, as we've talked about, hire and then payroll data, if indeed you are using TimesheetX, hours worked, earnings, all that data can be fed back into these particular solutions. Career services. This is where we really are hoping that you can get the best of both worlds. So some of you may be out there saying, well, we love our career services solution and that's great. However, maybe you're challenged with some of the things we talked about before, getting data in and out of that solution, or potentially not being able to decentralize that approval of the job process to make sure that your work study jobs are compliant. We can work with a career services solution. So like Handshake, for instance, they offer and apply through an external system. So you could integrate our JobX URL here, and that allows for your employees to all, or candidates to all come to one place. Perhaps that might be Handshake, but once they come in and apply for a particular job that's housed in JobX, they can be fed over to there, and that all those benefits that we just spoke about can be leveraged. So you can be assured that once they go and apply there, you can then hire them in JobX and get all of that app compliance, hire compliance, and then your hire data fed out into whatever solutions you need. As well as, although I think they do some employment checks like a federal work study type of check, we can support a lot more of those eligibility checks that you might need to give you, a restful night and make sure that all your candidates that are hired are compliant. So from a candidate perspective, they love to be able to apply for multiple jobs with one app. We have a feature called Job Mail where they can put in their attributes about a job that they care to be notified about. And when that job is posted, then they get a notification so that they can hopefully get first dibs on those jobs. We talked about, you can use our administrative tool to have pre-built job searches, but they then can do their own advanced search. And they love that they can get the communications throughout the entire life cycle. What tells them when they need to look for a job that matched their stuff. They get notified when they've been hired and if they need to do any onboarding forms. So that communication super helpful. They are, not needing to go in and complete their forms. They can do that remotely. And then if they need to come in simply for an inspection, a physical inspection of an I-9 and such, they can do so with ease. And then there's it's web and mobile accessible, and it's available 24/7. Here's just some visuals. I'm a very visual learner, and here's an example of where they can come in, and these boxes are allowing them to come in and apply for multiple jobs with one single click of the button. Job mail we talked about, after they receive these notifications that there's a matching job, they're able to go out and really get hopefully a great job opportunity. Here's some examples of once you are leveraging that dynamic forms, internal government form or onboarding form solution. This is kind of where they come to their dashboard and they're launching an I-9 or a W-4, a direct deposit, whatever, a confidentiality agreement. Any of those can be set up and they can, with a click, go in and get those forms completed. They'll also have one centralized area where they can see all the other jobs they've been hired into, their award balances if they're taking advantage of Timesheet X, their class schedules, all of the applications that they've submitted can be looked at on this tab, and they can watch where they are in that life cycle. So they don't need to come to your office and say, hey, did you hear about my, I applied for 6 jobs, I haven't heard for anything. So they can see all of that as it's being considered. This is just kind of talking about the online hiring forms. You can, in front of any form, you can build custom, what we call jump pages that allow you to really give detailed instructions. You can in the I-9 world, you can, by one quick answer of do you have a social or not, it can go down 2 different paths. If they said, no, I don't have an SSN, it would take them down a path where the SSN number is not required. Rather, they can fill everything else out in the form and then get it submitted over to the administrator while they are taking that 90 days to get their SSN documentation, and can bring it back so that administrator can come back into the form and update it no differently than if they had a paper form. But what I wanted to show on this I-9 is the conditional logic. So in this illustration, chose that I was a citizen. And as soon as I check this off, it immediately updates using that conditional logic, not applicable to all these fields. So it's really introducing a ton of compliance in helping you be less concerned about problematic forms. Here, this is an example of where it's showing that status back and forth to JobX. Here's an example of all the nice detailed communication that is included in some of those app greeting, rejection, onboarding type emails. Here's if you're a school that expects them to accept an offer after they've accepted it, they can do so and then decline those. So what are the benefits for the employers? They have an easy job posting experience. The workflow approval process ensures that their jobs can get reviewed and approved timely. They can have their own specific job questions added to the application so they can get their qualified candidate. They get email alerts, and the compliance checks take that burden off of those employers because the system is checking that for them, and they're getting those emails throughout that life cycle. Here's the main kind of hub of JobX, where we are focused on making everyone's job more efficient. So like with the applicants, your administrators can manage one or hundreds of jobs in seconds. They can move the jobs back and forth in different statuses. They can update. This is a view of a supervisor, but once you come into this view as an administrator, you can do mass wage changes. So if there's a minimum wage change, you don't have to go into every single job and modify that. Rather, you can do nice searches, and then you can select all the jobs and immediately do a mass change. You can change the contacts on the job. If someone leaves, you can get all those changed in quick fashion. You can do lots of filtering. You can make sure that you can go look at the applicants with ease. And then you can have customized disclaimers. So before an individual can apply for a job, you can present disclaimers so that those fraudulent employers who are posting jobs, convincing kids to pay a small fee for a badge, and then they come back after you when they realize it's a scam. This is not possible. They and JobX cannot see the population of jobs until they agree to custom disclaimers, and those can be different by different populations. This is an example of where an individual or candidate went through and applied for multiple jobs, and they were allowed to move forward with one of them, but could not move forward on the other because they didn't pass all those compliance checks. And all the messaging therein is customizable. So if they need to go to Office 202 to speak to Susie Chapstick about this issue, that can be customized. Here is easy access to your applicant data. Like with the jobs, your administrators can, and your hiring supervisors can mass manage all the applicant data. So they can export all the applicants out in a detailed fashion. That would give you a column for every single app question, and every respondent or applicant would be a row. And then you can do search, you can do sorting, and then come back in and flag those that you'd like to deal with either an interview, or you can send rejection emails. This can happen individually or in mass capacity. The supervisors can watch the completion of the forms, and if they decide that this is taking too long, they can cancel that hire and rehire somebody else. Oops. Here's an example of the hire validation and how sophisticated and how you can set those up so that they can pass. If they pass everything, they can move forward and do the hire contract. Maybe you just want to warn, but still allow them to go through with the hire contract until they finish these forms, or you can fail them from proceeding forward entirely. Here's some examples of the integrated customized communications where we're pre-filling data so that it's absolutely the messaging you wish, and all these template verbiage, all these different appends, you can manage the text that appear in these at a site level. And this isn't really, for TimesheetX, but I do want to say that we are going to be sharing this PowerPoint that I'm covering today. So we want to make sure you know that these features are included in that PowerPoint if you wish to go through those and reach out to me for additional information. But as with JobX, lots of customization, and it's very powerful. The timesheet solution can be purchased with JobX or separately, and it's done a great job of, not only tracking time, but time off and accruals. A lot of students are moving into a world where states are passing laws so that they can have sick time, and we can track that. We can track award balances at a student or departmental level, and so forth. So lots of information of how TimesheetX works, but not to burden you guys with that today. But you'll be able to see screenshots and certain areas of the product that might be meaningful to you. And if you have any questions about those, my information is present in the back of this particular PowerPoint, and you'll be able to also reach out to the individual at UT Knox if you wish to talk about their audit experience. Here is our website, and if you are visiting our website and decide that you wish to have a demo of JobX and or TimesheetX or any of the products that I talked about at NextGen, please be sure to just let us know that you heard about us through NACE, so that we can be aware of that, thank our NACE folks, and hopefully give you some nice benefits as a result of coming from NACE. And that's it. I wanted to make sure I left enough time for questions and answers, so I'm going to move over to the questions. All right, Miss Grace White, good morning. When running reports, is it possible to capture just the students receiving federal work study funding? Our goal is to run reports in JobX periodically to proactively identify those students that are exhausting those funds. So that's a great question, Grace. It really depends on what data that you are feeding us. If you're only using JobX, we have schools that will on a nightly basis will send us what the student's original award balance award amount is and their balance, and we can store that into JobX for purposes of the student seeing that, supervisor seeing that, for a more educated decision, because maybe if they only have $200 left of their award, they might want to offer an equally qualified candidate that has more that job. But most of the time, if you're looking for, identifying those students who have exhausted those funds, that's absolutely available in the TimesheetX solution. So TimesheetX is where we're taking the time entries and we're then reducing the award balance by the earnings at the conclusion of each pay period, so that you can then have nice reporting that says, I need to see anyone that's less, that has an award balance less than this particular amount. So lots of reporting there, but that would actually be the most meaningful if you're using JobX and TimesheetX or TimesheetX only. Does JobX have the capability to notify applicants if a recruitment is closed or expired? So as they close the jobs, it's ultimately being taken down, but we encourage that all of our, we encourage all of, through the applicant control panel that I showed you with mass capacity, our users are typically, once they're making decisions, they're reaching out to do greetings and schedule interviews for the folks that they wish to hire. And then the other ones, they're basically in mass capacity, choosing all those applicants and notifying them that that job is no longer available. Do you have an example of what a handshake advertisement that is linked to JobX would look like? I'm curious if the advertisement data needs to be posted in both Handshake as well as JobX. It's a great question. So oftentimes what our users who are using Handshake and JobX are doing is they're giving a very high level descriptor in Handshake, and then they are putting the URL over to the area that's called Find a Job on JobX. So what that then introduces to them is our JobX workflow. So they would immediately be presented with those disclaimers that I showed you to make sure that they are able to not only see this job that they might be interested in, but they can also see other jobs in JobX. So they then can go through that experience, choose the jobs they wish to apply for, go through that app validation that I spoke of, and then as they apply, get those applications to your on-campus supervisor so they can review those and take advantage of the hiring mechanism within JobX. Does JobX allow for identification documents to be reviewed and signed off in platform, or is there still a need for in-person validation of the ID documents for I-9? Awesome questions. Okay, so this is depending on what the school wants. So with our I-9 solution, some schools choose to have upload fields on the section 1 for the student or a candidate to upload those documents in advance. Some schools say, no, you can't do that. And we aren't looking for that to serve as the physical inspection step only. Rather, it helps those administrators who still need to do that in-person validation not have to, when they come in to do that part, scan it and upload it to the form when they're completing their section. Rather, it gives that to them in advance, and when they come in to do that in-person inspection, that supporting documentation's right there. They compare it to the person standing in front of them that's been uploaded and what they see in their hand. And then that supporting documentation stays with the form for the life of the form, so that if it goes into an imaging solution, you have not only the I-9 form, but the supporting documentation. Now, some of our schools will actually use that information and they will have a scheduled Zoom conference call. So that it was before, when you could actually do it remotely, but it's our understanding that you're still going to need that in-person validation. But being able to have them upload it in advance can speed it up once they come in. Is there an ability to have workflow approvals on job posting salary range over a certain amount? Absolutely, yes. So Princeton actually takes advantage of that. So they have a situation where if there is a wage that's greater than $50, then it has to go and be approved, by a different area, their graduate area then goes in and does that approval before the final administrator gets it back and does the final approval. Can JobX be used for student non-work study positions that would have a one-time payment, no timekeeping? In your experience, how are those best handled? Yes, those are considered, like we would say, its own type of job population. So you could, in that situation, we would configure that type of job to be a question that the employer answers when they're creating the job. So it would then be them selecting let's just call it a one-time payment job type. And when they select that, then that template that they see is going to be unique and driven to that one-time payment need. How does the platform handle students who have withdrawn from classes and are registered for less than 6 credit hours after applying for a job? Also, how is it hiring of international students handled? So that is all completely up to how you wish to handle it. Typically what they'll do is we'll create on the student account a credit hours field and an international student field. And if when they're applying or if when they're being hired, it just depends on where you want those checks to occur. You can have them occur at both. If they don't meet the criteria as you define it, then they will be halted at time of applying for the job, or potentially if you don't want those checks to happen at time of application and only hire time, then we can perform those checks at that time of hire. Did I answer all of that? I'm registered. Yep. Does JobX keep historical data for jobs that students were hired for and dates worked? Yes, we do. And we can also do mass hiring. So if the job, say in dining, has 100 positions, you can choose the students that you wish, all 100, and then hit hire, and then all 100 will go through that hire validation process, and say 20 didn't pass, 80 did, then those 20 you can send notifications, and then the 80 can actually go forward with the hire process. And we're actually doing a new feature that'll come out in June for rehire. So what that feature is going to do is when you're going through and wishing to rehire folks, you can go into that job and hit rehire, and it'll bring back a list of all the people who have been hired into that job. So you can simply click those boxes next to those people you wish to rehire with ease, and it will show their hire start and end date for those in that list, organized by most recently hired people at the top and down. I think that's it, unless I've missed any. It says 2 QA, so I'm not sure if I...
Yeah, the one at the top, we accidentally kind of skipped over when we were pushing over, said the one at the top, and then the one at the bottom just came in.
Okay, so the one at the top I'm seeing is Grace Wright.
Okay, let me read this question for you. What would you say for universities heavily invested into job search platforms like Handshake?
I'd probably say that the two can work well with one another from the standpoint of, if you are choosing to just have one place that the individuals start to look for jobs, and you can't see a world without Handshake because of the great career services, rich features, then I would say, the economical price point on ours in tandem with the Handshake solution is going to give you the comfort that you need to ensure that your federal work study funding is not in jeopardy due to compliance issues. So I would say, when you're looking at being able to get those approved in a compliant fashion, investing in JobX is super important. And, not only do you get the job recruitment aspects of things, but you also get the placement of those particular people in a custom fashion that maybe your hiring mechanisms aren't offering you. And then you can still get that hire data back into those. So I would say that they can work with one another well. But if you are, concerned about on-campus employment and really getting that feature built up, I think JobX can help with that differential it offers.
Okay, great. And then Tage, our last question here is, are students who have not completed the hiring documents and rejected for lack of progress, is there an email sent stating why their application was rejected?
Yes. So wait, hold on a second. Our students who have not completed the hiring documents and rejected for sent an email. Yes. So they can be sent declined, approved, or they can postpone a hire. And when they do the declined hire, they indeed can have verbiage that's already pre-filled in there that you've controlled at a site level, but the individual hiring supervisor or approver, depending on how that hire workflow is, can then add additional verbiage instructing why they weren't hired. I think that's it.
Yep, that's it, Tage. Thank you so much. You can conclude the session.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's time and great questions. Like I said, they'll be putting out the PowerPoint. Please feel free to reach me and schedule a demo. It's very painless. We do it remotely. And I am excited to speak with you and see if we can help you out. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tage.
Thanks.